What's going on YouTube? This is Texans Takeover back in another video. In today's video, I have my NFL draft biggest sleepers. Some of these aren't as big as the others. Some of these I have, one round. Like if they have a sixth round grade, sometimes I just have them in the fifth. But even then, it's still like a 40 pick jump, so I consider them a sleeper in my opinion. There's some guys I just want to highlight in this video. Some of my favorite guys in this class. So, if they're not that big of a jump, then just consider them one of my favorite guys. If it is a big jump, then consider them a sleeper in my opinion. Um, but yeah, these are my NFL draft biggest sleepers. Um, Quite a few of them. I have 28. This episode is all offense. The next time you get one of these videos, it's going to be all defense. Then the time after that, it's going to be my most overrated players on offense, most overrated players on defense, guys that I don't think are sleepers, but quite the opposite. But yeah, this is the NFL draft biggest sleepers in terms of the offensive players. So let's begin. Starting with Drew Aller, quarterback out of Penn State. You can see there he has a fourth to fifth round grade, and he only played 6 games this year because he got an ACL injury. And Penn State was not off to a hot start. They lost to UCLA. You can see his completion percentage there is not bad at about 65%. Went for 1,100 yards in those 6 games, so averaging less than 200 yards a game. But I do believe he got injured pretty early on in the Northwestern game. I could be wrong. Didn't throw the ball downfield all too much, only 7 yards per attempt. 8 pass touchdowns, 3 picks, so about 2.6 touchdowns to 1 interception. 93.8 passer rating, which is great. And my personal grade is a late second round to an early third round pick. And this is because I think that, Drew Aller's a guy with a great frame. He's around 6'4", excuse me. He has great mobility. It's yet to be seen what that mobility will be post ACL injury, but what he does very well, and that is move around the pocket well, get escape well, and scramble. He's a great quarterback at doing that. He has a solid arm too. He can throw the ball down the field well. He's not very turnover prone. So even when he is taking those risks, it's not like it's going to end up in the defensive hands. He stares down one side of the field um, quite often, and he takes too long to throw sometimes. It's around a 2.9 second time to throw ratio for Drew Aller. You'd like it to be around a 2.5 at or 2.6 at the highest, I'd say. So if a quarterback coach can get Drew Aller to his full potential, then you have a guy that could have been a first round pick headed into this last draft class, but decided to go back to college. Um, he had a bad start to the year, got injured, and I think he definitely would have graded out better if he was able to continue throughout the rest of the season and just pick up his momentum. But again, a guy with a great frame, he has great mobility, he has a very solid arm, can make every throw on the field if he wants to. Um, Very accurate at that too. He's not an inaccurate quarterback. You look to the year prior where he took Penn State to the college football playoff semifinal. And he was excellent throughout that playoff run. Everyone's thinking Penn State can make a run this year with him coming back. One of the better quarterbacks headed back to college football. Similar story to Cade Klubnik. I just think Drew Aller has all the tools to succeed in the NFL compared to Cade Klubnik. And I think some people are starting to sleep on him a little bit. Um, One of my favorite QBs in this class. I just think, if you can limit that time to throw, and if you can get him to start, processing his reads rather than staring down one entire side of the field, then you'll get a great quarterback because he does have the frame of like a Josh Allen. I'm not saying he is a Josh Allen. I'm saying his body build wise, he is very similar to Josh Allen. Great legs, and again, doesn't really put the ball in harm's way all too much. Although there are some blimps that he does. Um, but yeah, Drew Aller, I could. My personal grade has him in the late second to early third round compared to other quarterbacks. I think he's better than the likes of Carson Beck, who's graded higher than him, or even a Trinidad Chambliss, who's up there too. Moving on though to sleeper number two for it's another quarterback, Swear Robertson, quarterback out of Baylor. You can see he has a seventh round grade. He played 12 games this year, completed his passes around a 60% clip. Went for 3,683 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 31 passing touchdowns to 12 interceptions. So again, about 2.4 to 2.5 touchdowns to interception ratio. 93.2 passer rating. You can see very similar to Drew Aller in terms of that and in terms of the yards per attempt. I have him going, or my personal grade has him in the late fourth round to the early fifth round. Um, Again, another quarterback with a great frame. He's a little old. I believe he's a redshirt senior, um, or just a true senior. I'm not too sure, but I believe a redshirt senior. Pushes the ball downfield well. He has a very solid arm. He was asked to throw the ball a lot at Baylor. I think he threw the ball over 500 times this season. So he completed over 300 passes, which is why the completion percentage is about 60%. you'll consider that 300 out of 500. Pretty successful with the amount you're asked to throw the ball. He's a bit interception prone. You can see there with the 12 turnovers. I believe he had four in 2023. And only had two passing touchdowns. Didn't play all too much that year, and then I believe had eight last year. So, 24 interceptions in 3 college years. You're averaging about 8 a season. One of those seasons you didn't fully play. You'd like to be around averaging 6 per season. Um, he has very solid numbers, very flashy performances in there. Some games where he has 400 passing yards and you don't even blink an eye. You're expecting when you see Sawyer Robertson to take the field to at least get 300 passing yards. Just a very consistent passer. Um, you know, played within the Baylor system very well, and I think he can make a lot of throws across or not even across the diamond. This is not baseball. Across the field, quite well. Just a quarterback with a great frame. I think someone that you could rely on as a backup if you really want to. You know, I'm a Texans fan. I don't know if you're a Texans fan or a fan of a different team watching this, but in my Texans mock drafts, I do tend to pick Sawyer Robertson to come in and be a backup quarterback because I don't know what the future of Davis Mills is going to be. And I think Sawyer Robertson's a very solid quarterback at that. I think he could do a job in the NFL as a backup quarterback, and even step up to start for a team that has an injured quarterback. I think he could do a very solid job because he has a very solid arm and makes very solid reads. Sometimes just puts the ball in harm's way, but I think that's something that could be eliminated with the right coaching. So, yeah, I have Sawyer Robertson as my sleeper number 2 at the quarterback position. Here at number 3, I have Athan Kaliakmanis from Rutgers. It's another quarterback with the 7th round grade. Played 12 games this year. Completed his passes at a 62% clip this time. Went for 3,100 yards, 8.4 yards per attempt, about a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, a 99 passer rating. In my personal grade, has him in the mid 4th round. Again, another guy with a very solid frame, really good pocket passer. You don't really ask him to extend plays all too much. It's more of, he's in the pocket. He's able to go through his progressions, make the reads that he needs to. Amazing this year. I believe PFF had him at like an 88 grade or something like that, which is one of the highest rated quarterbacks in all of college football this year. He pushes the ball downfield spectacularly. Spectacularly, excuse me. I just choked on my words there. You can see with the 8.4 yards per attempt, one of the highest we've seen, and the highest we will see because this is the last quarterback on the list. Um, you know, a third of his yards are on deep throws. He has about 1,000 yards on deep throws this season, and you can see that 3,000 total yardage. So a third of those yards coming from deep throws shows how well he pushes the ball down the field and how often he pushes the ball down the field. And he's not turnover prone. You can see the stats here. They look kind of inflated with 3,100 yards. They're not. He wasn't asked to throw the ball all too much at Rutgers. Just completed his passes, threw the ball down the field spectacularly again. But they do have a very balanced system where they are asked to run the ball somewhat well, or somewhat a decent amount, with Kyle Monangai and Isaiah Pacheco getting drafted out of Rutgers. It's the same scheme that had them drafted. So if running backs getting drafted out of a lesser school, a lesser Power 5 school or Power 4 school, I'd say, then that means, they're relying on them in the run game. They do have players that they rely on the run game, but I think Kaliakmanis really stood out as a passer this year, and I think they, saw that as a weapon that they could utilize with his arm and his pocket presence. And they just rode through that the entire season. These stats, again, aren't inflated. Sawyer Robertson's are kind of inflated at the 3,700 passing yard mark. This is not. This is truly. I think Kaliakmanis having a incredible year, and this is a guy that I really like as a quarterback, and I would like to come in as a backup quarterback and even potentially get some run time. I would like to see how he does in the preseason because I do think there is a very solid quarterback in there, and it'll be exciting to see how he does in the NFL. But for me, I have him in the mid 4th round, so that's a 3-round jump, pretty big jump there. Moving on to a different position, we're starting with the running backs at the skill position. Starting off with Emmett Johnson, again, one of my favorite guys in this class. You can see the jump is not too drastic. It's a 3rd to a 4th round grade from, a lot of numerous sites. I would say lean more towards that 3rd round grade. Played 12 games, ran the ball 251 times, even though Dylan Raiola was the main facet of the offense at the quarterback position. Emmett Johnson really just took over this year. 1,451 rushing yards is absurd. Six yards per carry on 251 attempts is something that is really unheard of. 12 rushing touchdowns, a very solid receiver as well out the backfield. He's young. He's a true junior, uber productive. You see the numbers there: 1,451 rushing yards, 370 receiving yards. So about 1,800 all-purpose yards in terms of just rushing and receiving. That's not even considering the fact that he also returned kicks and punts at some point in the season. Um, he's good in both the gap and zone scheme, which the Texans both run, which I think is very valuable. He's better in the gap scheme compared to zone, and I think the grades will show that as well. But he's asked to run more in the gap scheme than the zone scheme at Nebraska, but he really excelled on that. Um, again, he's a good receiving threat. And he's not a bad blocker either. If you need him in the passing game to block, he's not that bad, but definitely something he can improve on. But for my Texans retrospectively, you have Woody Marks there to do that. You just have Emmett Johnson as your bell cow back, and he's going to get you the yardage that you need throughout the course of an entire season. He can be a bell cow for someone's team, and that's why I have him in the mid to late second round. Moving on though to another running back that is kind of in the same stratosphere as in Emmett Johnson, and that's Seth McGowan out of Kentucky. He's got a fourth round grade from all the numerous sites. Only played in 11 games this year. Um, I say only. He didn't play in only one game this year. Kentucky did not make a bowl, or did they? And I'm just tweaking. I don't know. But ran the ball only 166 times for 400 or 730 rushing yards, which equates to about 4.5 yards per attempt. 12 rushing touchdowns in there, 121 receiving yards. You can see I have him bumping up about around to the early third round. Another younger running back, but he has a great frame. I believe he's 6'1". And unlike Emmett Johnson, he's pretty balanced in the gap to zone scheme. It's not like he's better in the gap scheme like Emmett Johnson is, or better in the zone scheme like other backs are. He's very good at both. Just a very balanced back. Averaged about 3 yards after contact. So with that frame that he does possess, it's about 6'1". I'd say 215. Very good after contact. Can run down the field well. Um, he can catch pretty well too. I know 121 receiving yards doesn't seem like a lot, but he wasn't asked to catch the ball too much. Kentucky didn't have the best quarterback play this year with Zach Calzada starting out the season, and then I don't know who took over. I don't remember the name. I just remember the face for some reason, just because of that UT game that I was watching. Um, the thing he can improve on, he's not a great blocker, but he wasn't really tasked to block all too much, so it wasn't like he was really showing all that much because again, Kentucky wasn't really pushing the ball down the field all too much this year with how bad their quarterback play was. So, I'd say it's very similar to Emmett Johnson in the fact that they can improve as blockers, but I would say Emmett Johnson's a little bit more refined as a pass blocker just because he was asked to do that a little bit more. So Seth McGowan, once he comes into the NFL, is definitely going to have to learn to pass block a little bit more. But again, a guy that I think is a great back. Um, someone that's explosive, someone that can, I think make some noise in the NFL wherever he gets drafted to. And that's why I have him bumping up a round to the early third round. Moving on, though, we got another running back in Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas. He's got a late fourth to an early fifth round grade, in my opinion, from the numerous sites that I've looked at. 12 games played, 160 rushing attempts for 1,066 rushing yards, which equates to 6.5 yards per attempt. 8 rushing touchdowns, and then 226 receiving yards. I have him graded out as a late third round grade. Um, Again, similar to McGowan and Johnson, he's a younger back. I think a true junior. He has a huge build. He's like 6'2", but he's athletic. With that build, he's very good in the screen game, which is what most of those 226 receiving yards came from. Checkdowns and screens. I mean, you look at the 2025 production, it looks great in terms of the stat sheet. 6.5 yards per carry is absurd. Similar to Seth McGowan, he's balanced in the gap and zone scheme. And as I touched on earlier, he is a very good security blanket. Those screens, those checkdowns was very important for Taylor Green in his game. Obviously, he liked to push the ball down the field as a quarterback and use his own legs, but Mike Washington had a great year. 6.5 yards per carry on 167 attempts is nothing to shy away from. I think this is a great back. He's going to be great in the NFL wherever he goes to. He averaged about 4 yards after contact, which is a yard more than Seth McGowan, and I just said that was great for Seth McGowan to have 3 yards after contact. So that just says a lot about how good Mike Washington is as a running back. Um, a very elusive back too for his size. You think of big backs, you don't think of them as these shifty guys that can move well in space. You think of those guys that get downhill, bulldoze over some people. But no, Mike Washington's very elusive. I talked about it earlier. He's athletic, um, and he's going to be great for whatever team gets him. And I think he's versatile enough in the gap and zone scheme that if it is a team that runs both, he's going to be able to fulfill that role. Um, so yeah, I can't really say enough good things about Mike Washington Jr. I also think he's probably the best blocker that I've talked about so far. Um, I'll give that to Emma Johnson still. I think he's between McGowan and Johnson in terms of blocking. Just because it's a little difficult to block in that Arkansas system with Taylor Green running around all the time. But um, I do expect him to be a pretty fine blocker in the NFL, especially with the size that he possesses. Moving on though to sleeper number 7, and that is Mr. Kalon Black out of Indiana. He's got a 6.2, a 7th round grade. He played 16 games this year for the Hoosiers, who went 16-0. Ran the ball 186 times for 1,034 yards, which equates to about 5.5 yards per attempt. 10 rushing touchdowns throughout the course of the year, only 42 receiving yards, and I have him graded out as a mid 4th round grade. This is because he's older, he's a redshirt senior, so you're really getting, I'd say, 3 years of prime production out of Kalen Black coming into the NFL before he really starts to let age do his course. He runs uber hard. He's one of the hardest runners in this draft class. He's going to get downhill. He's going to be physical with you, and he's not going to go down. There's some times in the season where you're looking at what he marks and you're like, geez, this dude won't go down. His legs just keep churning. Think about that, but on steroids with Kalen Black. I mean, just a really, really good running back. Went over 1,000 yards on sub 200 carries. Great statistics. Same thing with Mike Washington Jr., who had that in the last slide, where he had, I think, 167 carries and went over 1,000 yards too. So, both great running backs in that. Good in both the zone and gap scheme. This is a guy that's better in the zone compared to gap scheme. I think most backs coming out of college you see are better in the gap scheme, but Kalen Black better in the zone scheme. This is because obviously Indiana runs the RPO. It's a lot of more zone scheme than gap scheme running the RPO, and Kalen Black is excellent when teams run the run pass option. He's got a good frame. He's not the best receiver though, and he could definitely be a little bit better of a blocker. The Indiana blocking wasn't great this year, and I don't think you can really blame that on a running back. But I do think Kalen Black probably could have helped solidify it a little bit better in terms of the run pass option, especially when he knows that Mendoza's pulling it and throwing it, or just on true pass downs. I think he could have been um, a little bit better in terms of a blocker, but he's great after contact, averaging about 3.5 yards. Um, After contact every carry. Just again another insane statistic. These 3 backs that we've talked about last in terms of McGowan, Washington Jr., and Black are great after contact. And the one we're talking about next is great after contact as well. But yeah, a lot of good things to say about Kalen Black. I think he definitely could have been higher in terms of draft prowess if he just wasn't as old as he was. So that's why I don't have him jumping up too much. But I think whoever gets him is getting a great playmaker for 3 years. And if you get him that late in the draft, I consider that a steal because you're getting 3 years of good production from a running back in the 6th or 7th round. I think you're taking that all day of the week. And I think you're taking that all day of the week in the 4th round, which is why I have him jumping all the way up to there. Moving on to this guy that I have in the mid 4th round again, who's averaging 3.5 yards after contact in Noah Whittington. Played 13 games for Oregon this year. Only ran the ball 129 times, but went for 829 rushing yards and went for 6.5 yards per carry, which is very similar to Mike Washington. 6 touchdowns in there too, and about 100 receiving yards. Again, another older back. I believe the same age as Kalen Black, maybe slightly younger, but a redshirt senior. He's a great gap runner. I wouldn't say the best in terms of a zone runner, but he's a great gap runner. So a team that runs the gap scheme is going to get very lucky with Noah Whittington because he's excellent in that scheme. He's got a very stocky frame. I believe he's about 5'8", 5'9", 200. You think of Jonah Coleman. That's exactly what Noah Whittington is. They're very similar prospects. I just think Jonah Coleman has a little bit more promise and a little bit more potential heading into the NFL, especially with his age too. And Whittington's not the best receiver, but he's a very good blocker in the pass game. So he's not really tasked to receive the ball all too much. When you can just run the play action, he's going to block for you amazingly. Especially when you run the gap scheme a lot, that allows you to run the play action pretty well. He's a very elusive back. He's a very explosive back at 6.4 yards a carry. You can tell the explosiveness is there. And he's definitely a force to be reckoned with every time he's on the field. It's just that age that's going to be a factor, but I think he's a great back. I think he's definitely undervalued in terms of the sites, in terms of their grades for him. Graded out every year, or graded out well every year that he's been in college, and I think that will continue in the NFL. So yeah, I don't have enough good things to say about Noah Whittington. One of my draft crushes in this class, and a seventh round grade goes to a mid fourth round grade for me. Moving on to the last back in this, draft sleepers, I got Devon Booth from Mississippi State. He's currently considered a late seventh to an undrafted free agent in terms of his round grade, just very low down there. Played 12 games for Mississippi State this year. Um, Only ran the ball 136 times, went for 553 rushing yards, which equates to about 4.1 yards per attempt. Punched it into the end zone 7 times and caught the ball for 165 receiving yards. I have him in the late fifth to the early sixth round, which is considerably higher than a late seventh round pick or potential undrafted free agent. Again, another older back. He's a great zone runner, very similar to Kalen Black in that sense. Doesn't go down, very elusive. And he's a very decent receiver. He's great in terms of the screen game, the check down game. Every time Blake Shapen needed to look to Devon Booth, he was very reliable in the receiving game. Um, as I just said, he's elusive. He's really good after the catch. He's really good in open space. Been productive for 3 years in college. I think this is one of his down years in terms of production. And he's got a very solid frame. Early in the year, a lot of people were very high on Devon Booth, and then that kind of just died down as Mississippi State progressively got worse and worse. Very fun to watch though when you do watch him, and I think the thing that makes him fun to watch is that he's good versus the good schools. You look at the Texas A&M game, a team with a great defense. He was very good in that game. The thing that he can definitely improve on is he's a very bad blocker. Um, I think that's going to hinder him a little bit in terms of this draft process because, for these older guys, you're looking at what can maximize your years in the NFL, and I think a big key in that is being a good blocker. But that's just not the case for Devon Booth, and it's not for everyone. So there's that. Not many backs are great at blocking. There's just a select few in college, but those are the guys that tend to be drafted into the NFL and have long stays in the NFL. That doesn't seem like that's the case for Devon Booth, but great running back, very fun to watch, very electric player, great receiver, and pretty exciting when he has the ball in his hands. So I wouldn't be too surprised if he does get drafted. I have my personal grade for him in the late fifth or the early sixth round. And that concludes the running backs. Headed over to the wide receivers. We got Mr. Antonio Williams out of Clemson, who's projected to go in the mid fourth round from the sites. Only played in 10 games for Clemson this year, who had 13 games on their schedule this year with the bowl game against Penn State. Had 55 receptions in those 10 games, so averaged about 5.5 receptions a game. Went for 611 receiving yards, which I think is his lowest production in college, and went for about 11.1 yards per reception, and found the end zone 6 times. I believe he found the end zone 6 times every year he was in college. Could be wrong. You can fact check me on that, but I have him in the late second or early third round. Um, a younger receiver, a true junior, I believe, or a redshirt junior. Very good slot for him. Going to be a really good slot receiver in the NFL with whoever gets him. He reminds me a lot of Jalen Knoll for some reason, in terms of slot receiver. Even though he's a little bit bigger, I believe he's 5'11". Um, he reminds me a lot of Jalen Knoll. Good slot frame, great separator in terms of man coverage and even zone coverage. He finds the soft spots in the zones very well, and he's good at just route running and separating in man coverage. He had a better 2024 than 2025, but I think that can be said for a lot of Clemson players. Even in my first round mock drafts, I say that for Peter Woods all the time, so I'm not going to hinder them too much on that. Um, he has amazing hands. He doesn't drop the ball once they do hit his hands. You don't really see him drop it all too often. I think he's good for one drop or two drops a year, and that's about it. And he's probably going to be some team's gadget guy with the speed and or acceleration that he does possess, as well as the shiftiness he possesses in the NFL. So, a very exciting prospect here in Antonio Williams. I think he'll go higher than the mid fourth. I think a team's going to fall in love with his tape from the year prior, not this year per se, but the year prior he was a lot better. Um, and I think all Clemson guys were. So I think someone's going to take a shot or at least some teams will take some shots on the Clemson guys, and I think Antonio Williams will certainly be one. So I think he'll go earlier than the mid fourth, and somewhere probably in the third round. Moving on though to another receiver who's very similar to Antonio Williams in terms of draft position, and that is Malachi Fields. Although they are uberly different in terms of profile. Um, Malachi Fields at Notre Dame has a mid fourth round grade. Played in 12 games this year, caught the ball 36 times, went for 630 receiving yards, which equates to 17.5 yards per reception, and found the end zone 5 times this year. And my personal grade for him is in the early third round, so about jumping up about around there. But you see that yards per reception, it just blows off the charts. Um, it shows his explosiveness as a receiver. He has a great frame. He's about 6'4", 220. And he's had consistent production every year that he was in college. I believe he's sitting around the 600 to 800 receiving yard mark every year that he's been in college, and around the 5 to 7 touchdown mark as well. Um, Amazing frame, good hands. I think he could improve a little bit in contested catching, but um, he's very solid there as well. Um, Good hands in traffic, good hands just regularly. I think he can improve as a separator, but it's a little hard to be a good separator at that size. I'm not going to fault him too much on that. Um, the consistent production definitely stands out to me as well as the yards per reception. Seems like This is probably not going to be a great comp, but Alec Pierce in Cincinnati. This seems like a very similar prospect to him. Obviously, he's killing it with the Indianapolis Colts. See where he goes in free agency, but it feels like Malachi Fields is a very similar prospect to Alec Pierce. But Alec Pierce, I'd say, has significantly better hands than Malachi Fields does. One of the best hands in the league, but I think Malachi Fields does have very, very solid hands, and I think they will allow him to be a very solid receiver in the NFL for quite some time. Um, and I have him going in the early third round. Moving on to sleeper number 12, and that is Chase Roberts out of BYU. He's got an early fifth round grade, I'd say, from all the sites that I've looked at. He played in 13 games for BYU this season, racking in 54 receptions for 802 receiving yards, averaging about 15 yards per reception, which is another pretty explosive number. Found the end zone 6 times, and I have him in the late third round. This is a guy who's older, but he's been very productive the last 2 years in college football. I believe 800 years the last two seasons. The thing that he does need to improve is his hands. He drops the ball at a pretty high rate, and I think if he is able to improve that, that's one of the biggest signs of this guy going to be a very solid player in the NFL. He's good versus man coverage. Excuse me. He's a very solid separator. He's got an amazing frame too, and this can be your go-to guy on offense. This was BYU's go-to guy on their offense. You think of a big slot receiver, that's what Chase Roberts can definitely be. He can definitely play as the X or the Y too. Doesn't have to play as a big slot per se, but I definitely think that's where he'd flourish. I think he could be not Puka Nakua, but similar in terms of route running. Just a little bit worse hands than Puka's got, in my opinion. But if you are able to train those, I think there's a very solid receiver in there in the NFL that's going to last for a very long time. That's why I have him in the late third round because I don't think that many teams are going to be wanting to pass on Chase Roberts with the potential that he does possess. Um, I think the only knock on him is that he is an older guy, so um, you know I know wide receivers can have longer careers, but if it's a guy that you're needing to develop their hands and teach them your scheme, figure out where you want to play him within your scheme, and you're not really wanting to have a rookie contract up when he's 20, 27, 26, somewhere around there. I think 27. Um, it's just not really worth the pick, so that's why probably the early fifth round grade gets factored in there. But in terms of talent, I have him in the late third round. Um, so there is that. Sorry, if you watched one of my previous videos, then you would have known that my mouse was low battered and it died, so that's why you saw the slides come up and my screen go to the right. I had to pause it so I could go get the charger, but anyways, moving on to number 13, we got our last wide receiver in Mr. Josh Cameron out of Baylor, second Baylor guy in this video, combining with Sawyer Robertson, the quarterback. This is another older guy, but he's got a very solid frame and amazing hands. He plays bigger than he is. Even though I said he has a solid frame, it's about 6'1". Plays like he's 6'3". In Similar to Chase Roberts, he's had 2 years of great production, and he's a decent separator. Definitely could be better, but him playing bigger than he is means that he's very good at those contested catches and just coming down with the balls that Silver Robertson puts up there. You can see that he has a late sixth round grade in PFF or Pro Football Network. All those websites are the ones that I'm using. Played 12 games this year for Baylor, caught 69 passes for 872 receiving yards. Went for about 12.6 yards per reception, 9 receiving touchdowns, and my grade is a mid third round just because of how well he plays at this size, and I think how consistent of a producer he was at Baylor. So, yeah, that's what I think of Josh Cameron. I think he's a lot better than what he gets credit for, and I think Baylor has some very underrated prospects headed in this class, and that's shown with Robertson and Cameron. So yeah, I have him moving up quite a bit, but I think it's worth it for whoever takes a shot on him. I just hope he gives up the number 34. That's all only really negative thing I have to say other than that. I think he could be a little bit better of a separator. Moving on to number 14, though, we got Mr. Blake Miller out of Clemson. He's got a mid third round grade right now. Played 13 games, only allowed 2 sacks. Sorry, I just sneezed. Yeah, only allowed 2 sacks, only allowed 2 quarterback hits, and only 10 hurries allowed. Played 875 offensive snaps. I have him going in the late first or early second round, and that's because he's got ideal offensive tackle sizes as well as offensive tackle length. You'd like the arm length to be around 33 to 34 inches, um, and I think that's definitely what Blake Miller possesses. I think it's going to be very important for his draft process because I think teams are going to value that, especially with the lack of true offensive tackles there are in this class. Um, but other than that, he's a great pass blocker. Excuse me. He's very agile. And he's got powerful hands, very shifty, or not shifty hands, but you know what I mean. He's able to move his hands very well, and once he gets a grip of the opposing defensive end, he's not letting go. Very powerful, but he's also very quick at the offensive tackle position, able to get to a spot very well and very quickly. Um, and he's also a good zone run blocker. You'd like him to improve in the gap scheme, but he's a good zone blocker. And I think the only negative for him is that he's not the best in the gap scheme in terms of a run game, but just a very solid prospect all around. And I have him moving up or about a round and a half to the late first round from the third round just because of how well he profiles as a true tackle. Moving on though to sleeper number 15, we got Austin Barber, another offensive tackle out of Florida. Uh, all the websites give him about a mid. That's supposed to say fourth round, not Ford. Fourth round grade. Played 12 games this year. Allowed 3 sacks, only 1 quarterback hit, but then 13 quarterback hurries. Excuse me, and this was all on 750 offensive snaps. I have him moving up about a round and a half to about a late second round pick. This is because of how good a run blocker he is. You look at the run grades; I think they're about at a 90. And I know no one likes to look at PFF grades, but if you're graded at a 90, that means you did something uberly well this season, and you watch the tape, he's very good in the run game. Very similar to Blake Miller, as I just said, once he gets his hands on you, he's not letting go. But for Austin Barber, he's driving you back the whole length of the field. Think about Michael Lohr in the Blindside movie when, he just dumped that dude um, in the back of the end zone. That's exactly what Austin Barber could do to you. Bit of an older guy, but he has good offensive tackle size. I think might have the arm length issue to the point where he might play guard. Um, but he needs to improve his pass blocking. That's the one thing that's really knocking him down, and that's why he probably has the mid fourth round grade, not the mid third. It's supposed to say fourth, not forward. It's really aggravating me. But he's a healthy and reliable option on the offensive line. Hasn't missed a game throughout college, I don't think. And just a very consistent performer at about a 7.10 or 7 out of 10 every week, I'd say. Um, and you're getting at least 9 out of 10 in the run game every time that he is out there on the field. So yeah, just a very intriguing prospect in Austin Barber because if he can coach up the passing game, then you have one of the best offensive linemen in the league. It's just about coaching up that passing game, which might take a while. And considering that he's a little bit older, it's really what team is going to be willing. But I don't think age is really a concern with the offensive line because offensive linemen can play till 35 or 36 and still be at the same level. Moving on to sleeper number 16, we got Elijah Pritchett out of Nebraska. He's got a mid 6-star grade from all the websites, not a sixered. I don't know. I was just trying to make a pun there with, my calamity last slide, but whatever. Played 13 games and allowed 5 sacks, which is probably the highest total that we've seen so far. 0 quarterback hits allowed and only 5 hurries allowed, though. Played 552 offensive snaps, and that's how he allowed the 5 sacks and the 5 hurries. And my personal grade for him is in the mid fourth round, so he's jumping up 2 rounds there. He's very consistent in the run and pass game. You know what you're getting with Elijah Pritchett when you watch his film. He's young and he's got the ideal size for an offensive tackle. Could play guard in the NFL, but I think he'll be tried out at tackle. And he improved majorly from 2024. And even this season, he got better as the season went along. With these young guys, you really expect them to just show gradual improvement throughout their college career, and that's exactly what Elijah Pritchett did. Got better from 2023 to 2024, got better from 2024 to 2025, and just a consistent improver. Transferred from Alabama to Nebraska, and I think he'll do some decent things in the NFL with the trajectory that he's been on for his career. It's just whether or not he's going to stick at guard or tackle. I'd like to see him try at tackle because I do think he has decent athleticism there to get to his spot. I just don't think he should be playing the left tackle. I think he should be playing the right tackle because I do think his right hand's a lot more dominant than his left hand is, especially when he's extending. So there's that. We'll see what happens with Elijah Pritchett, though. I have him moving up 2 rounds in his grade. I think he's a very intriguing prospect, especially with how young he is compared to all the other offensive linemen. And he's definitely got the size to play that tackle position. It's just about the arm length that I'm, I'm not too concerned about, but I'm intrigued to see what that number's at. But the improvement shows me a lot of promise there from Elijah Pritchett. And I think that improvement will continue in the NFL, and I think he'll be a very solid player for years to come. Moving on, though, to sleeper number 17, we got Mr. Nolan Rucci out of Penn State. This is a guy with a mid-7th round grade. He played 12 games this year. Only allowed 1 sack, only allowed 1 quarterback hit, but pretty high number of hurries at 14 quarterback hurries allowed. Played 611 offensive snaps in a pretty bad Penn State offense that was really run reliant after Drew Aller did get hurt, who we talked about earlier in this video, actually. Um, but this is a guy with traditional offensive tackle size. He has amazing size. He's about 6'8". Um, and he's a very good zone run blocker. This is a Penn State team that ran a lot of zone run after Drew Aller got hurt. And, you know, even with Drew Aller, a lot of the read options he did were out of the zone scheme. He's a good pass blocker as well. He's a little bit older of a guy. I think he's a redshirt senior or redshirt junior, or a true senior, somewhere in that mix. But on the older side, just not a true junior, which you would consider younger. I would like him to add some more weight. He's pretty slim right now. He's like 6'8", 310. I'd like him to be like 6'8", 330. But he moves well for his size and, well, I guess his height, not really his size. And just a really athletic offensive tackle that's going to be an intriguing option for a lot of teams across the board just because of his size and, the traits he possesses could really translate well to the NFL. So for me, I have this mid-7th round grade moving to a late 4th or an early 5th round grade, and I think that's a fair grade for him because there is definitely a lot of talent on display when you do watch him alongside Olave Ione there alongside the Penn State offensive line, which was a very solid unit this year. Just Sorry, my recording completely bugged and moved over to Chase Basantis, but what I meant to say was not the best in terms of talent altogether, and the roster just didn't really come together the way it was supposed to. But Nolan Rucci definitely showed off his potential as an offensive tackle, and I think that potential will fluctuate well in the NFL and translate well. But you did see this player come up next, and that is Mr. Chase Basantis out of Texas A&M. He has a late 3rd round grade. He played 13 games for Texas A&M this year, only allowed 1 sack and 3 quarterback hits, and only 8 quarterback hurries in 795 offensive snaps. I have him as a late 1st and early 2nd round grade, and that's because he has good size for an offensive guard. He's about 6'5", 315. I'd like to say consistent. He's good in all facets of the game: zone scheme, gap scheme, screen pass, RPO, pass game. Quick game, long game, he's going to be able to hold up for you or do a very solid job wherever you want him to. That's one of the best facets of his game, is how good he is and reliable he is in every facet of the game. He's young, a true junior, true senior, somewhere around there. Agile, he's going to be able to pull block for you. He's very athletic from the offense guard position, and he was on one of the best offensive line units in college football. And the main reason that it was one of the best offensive line units in college football was thanks to him. Um, Powerful hands, able to drive you back, able to stand his ground. He has a very low center of gravity. He's probably one of the smartest players in this class. He's great at picking up the blitz, identifying the mic pre-snap for the offensive line to know who's coming, what they need to do, how they need to shift. Just one of the most underrated players in this class, and I think a team like the Texans in the late first round or the Titans in the early second round could be looking to uh, go with Chase Bisontis there to improve their offensive line, which definitely needs help. And I think he's one of the more underrated players in this class. So, yeah, sorry for the confusion with this just randomly cutting out. I don't know, my recording randomly paused, but yeah, Nolan Rucci, offensive tackle, going to go in the late fourth to early fifth round. Yeah, sorry for the bug there, but Chase Bisontis is the guy that's next, and I have him going in the late first to early second round, somewhere in that 28 to 40 range is where I really would like to see him go, because I think he definitely deserved to be drafted that highly with how talented he is as a prospect, with his size, with how consistent he was throughout the entire year. Grades weren't that high, but that's just because of how consistent of a performer he was. It's not like he had a great game. It's not like he had a bad game. He was just consistently good. Um, and you watch his tape, he's great in every single aspect of the game. So I think that's something that's going to be very valuable to teams. And I think Chase Bisontes is going to go fairly high in this draft. So that's who I have at my sleeper number 18. Back to normality. Recording issues all done. We can finally move back at this normal pace. Moving on from Chase Bisontes, though, we're back to the offensive line. Again, another offensive guard, this time from Auburn. We got Mr. Jeremiah Wright. This is a guy with a late 7th to an undrafted free agent round grade from all the sites that we looked at. Played in 12 games this year for Auburn, allowed 5 sacks, 1 quarterback hit, and 16 hurries. So, pretty meh numbers there. Quarterback hits is very low, 5 sacks is a little high, as well as 16 hurries. He did this in 767 offensive snaps. And my personal grade for him is the mid-5th round, so going up about 2.5 rounds there, or, even more potentially with that UDFA run grade. But yeah, for him, he's got good size. He's a great pass blocker. Excuse me. He needs to work on the gap scheme. I think he's a little bit better in the zone scheme, which Auburn ran a lot more of. Obviously, with Jackson Arnold at quarterback to start the year, a lot of QB runs. Typically, when you see QB runs, it's a lot of zone scheme. He's very sack prone though. You see those 5 sacks allowed. That is the thing that he needs to improve on. Although he's a good pass blocker, so sometimes it's just holding up in protection, and then he gets beat. Needs to work on his hands. His like I talked about with Chase Bisontis, if you stick to a guy, just hold on them. I think another great example of that is Austin Barber, who we talked about earlier, in terms of just sticking on that guy, running him down the field whenever you want to. Obviously, you can't do that on pass blocking downs, but get a firm grip of the guy. Don't allow him to slim you, club you, um, any of that, even just use bendiness. But he's at offensive guard, so you don't really see D tackles doing that all too much. But he improved throughout the year. That's why I say he's very similar to Elijah Pritchett from Nebraska. They're very similar profiles, just at different positions. One's at offensive tackle, one's at offensive guard. But I do think Jeremiah Wright has improved every year in college. I could be wrong. Maybe some people say he might have had a better last year than this year, but I think he was solid for Auburn this year. I don't think he's been that bad. Auburn had a great offensive line this year. Xavier Chaplin's headed back to college, though. He was definitely someone that was draft eligible. But yeah, this is a guy that's improved throughout the year, improved every year he's been in college, in my opinion, and someone that I could see end up being drafted just because of that constant improvement that teams are looking from offensive linemen that he does possess. Moving on though to sleeper number 20, we got Mr. J.C. Davis out of Illinois. I listed him as a guard, and that's why he came later compared to the true offensive guards. This is because he's a tackle that's likely to play guard in the NFL. The guy afterward is as well. But J.C. Davis out of Illinois, he has a mid-4th round grade from all the sites that I've looked at, I'd say. Played in 12 games this year, only allowed 3 sacks and 2 quarterback hits. 13 hurries is quite a lot. And he did this all in 776 offensive snaps. My personal grade for him is the early 3rd round, and that's because he's very similar to Austin Barber in the fact that he's an amazing run blocker. But for him, he's also a very solid pass blocker. It's not like he's bad in pass blocking. It's just you watch him, the tape really stands out when you watch him in the run game. He's very solid in the pass blocking um, department as well, though. Got a good frame. He's a younger guy. Similar to Chase Basantis, he's good at the blitz pickup. I'd say Basantis is a little bit better in that category, but J.C. Davis is certainly good at communicating, diagnosing the blitz pre-snap from an offensive line position, and he's agile enough to get to that position that he needs to get to. He's going to be able to pull for you. He's athletic enough to do that. He's got very quick hands. He's able to mitigate the swim club damage that a pass rusher could get on you. The thing that beat him, I think, is his spin move a little bit, but even then, he does have the quick hands and the agility to just shuffle, reset, and make sure that the defensive lineman stays in front of him. I think with good coaching in the NFL, somewhere like a Philadelphia would be lucky to have him. I think the Texans, with their early third round pick from the Giants, would be lucky to have him on the interior offensive line, which they need a lot of help at. This is one of my biggest sleepers in the class. I know it's only moving up a round and a half, but from the fourth to the third is a significant jump. It's an entire day worth of waiting. And I think J.C. Davis is one of the most underrated guys in this class. I think one of my favorite guys that I've watched this season just because of how good he is as a run blocker, and I think the Texans could really use that. Moving on, though, to number 21, very similar guy to J.C. Davis, and that is Cage Casey. You can say what you want. He's an amazing pass blocker. I think an amazing pass blocker, an amazing run blocker. Great at both. I'd say he's a little bit better of a run blocker than a pass blocker. You can see 4 sacks allowed a little bit high, but only one quarterback hit, only 5 hurries allowed in 942 offensive snaps. So a lot bigger of a sample size than everyone else gives him, or than every other offensive lineman has had so far. He has a late fifth round grade from all the sites. Played in 13 games this year, and my personal grade for him is an astounding late second round. So that's 3 rounds of improvement for Cage Casey. That's how big of a sleeper I think he is. Again, an amazing run blocker. He's one of the main reasons Ashton Jeanty was able to be as good as he was last year. And Madsen was great this year. Cage Casey was able to block for him at the quarterback position. A good frame, a younger guy, amazing at blitz pickup. Teams that tried to blitz or just overload the box, Cage Casey was able to get to a spot, stay stagnant, not let guys past him. He's great at that, agile, very similar to J.C. Davis as a prospect with those quick hands. Another guy that's technically a tackle, but I think projects as a guard in the NFL. This is one of my favorite guys in this class. I think J.C. Davis and Cage Casey, these tackles that are translating over to guards, are some of my favorite guys in this class. Another guy you can think of is Carter Smith from Indiana. Um, but yeah, the tackles translating to guards are some of my favorite guys in the class because they do have the size and they have the agility to get to their spot, or else they wouldn't have been playing tackle. And I think that will really help them out switching to offensive guard, where they'll still have power. They'll probably have the size advantage over their defensive tackles, and they have a very solid amount of athleticism, and that's the case for Cage Casey. That's why I have him jumping 3 rounds, which is probably one of my highest into the late second, and a big jump at that from the fifth to the second. I think is probably my biggest jump that I gave out in this video. Um, Anyways, moving on to the centers, I think this could be a very big jump as well. But Mr. Pat Coogan out of Indiana, he has a late fourth round grade. Played in 16 games this year for Indiana. Obviously went 16-0 on the national championship, as I touched on with Kalen Black earlier. Um, Allowed 0 sacks, 0 quarterback hits, and only 10 hurries allowed, in 1,027 offensive snaps. So, um, what is that? 1% of his offensive snaps, a little bit less, are quarterback hurries, and then no sacks and no hits allowed. My personal grade for him is in the mid second round. He's an older guy, so I can understand why the grade is there. But he had an amazing 2025, probably one of the best offensive linemen in college football, if not the best. Transferring from Notre Dame to Indiana just really showed out for them this year. Um, Similar to Chase Basantis in the way that he has a low center of gravity. He doesn't really get pushed back too often. He's a great pass blocker, good zone and gap run blocker. It's not like he's good at one or the other. He's good in the both zone and gap scheme. I will say Indiana ran more zone scheme with the RPO, but if you need him to be a gap blocker, he can definitely do that in the run game. And in my opinion, this is the most underrated guy in this draft class. Excuse me. I know I had Cage Casey jumping up a lot more than him, but I have him going from the late fourth to the mid second round, so that's 2.5 rounds. It's still a very significant jump. Um, And I mean, you look at the 0 sacks, 0 quarterback hits allowed. I think that says it all in who Pat Coogan is. Won the Rose Bowl MVP as an offensive lineman. I think it's just astounding the work he's done this year. And yeah, just one of my favorite guys in this class. He has very good size for a center too. I believe he's around 6'5", 315. Similar to a lot of offensive guards, he possesses that size. Um, and yeah, just that center of gravity and his ability to not get pushed back, but rather push forward, is something that is astounding to me. He's just such a good offensive lineman, so fun to watch on tape. And he prowess in the run game, prowess in the pass blocking game. So that's why I have him as my most underrated player. This is my biggest draft crush, by the way. Um, for those of you who are watching this video for the first, or watching my channel for the first time, all my Texans videos, I love to bring up Pat Coogan. I love the idea of bringing Pat Coogan to a team that needs an offensive lineman. A team that needs a center. Pat Coogan could be your guy. In my opinion, the best center in this class overall. I like him than Slaughter than Lou, but it's yet to be seen what will happen in the NFL draft. I don't think Coogan will go ahead of those guys. Just just saying how much I like him. Moving on though to the last offensive lineman in this video, and that is Connor Tollison out of Mizzou. He's got an early 7th round grade. I only have him jumping up about a round and a half, I'd say, to the late 5th. But he played in 13 games for Mizzou this year, allowed 3 sacks from the center position, which is quite high. Only 1 quarterback hit and only 10 hurries in 876 offensive snaps. Um, yeah, another older guy similar to Pat Coogan in terms of age. And he's got a decent frame. I think he's 6'4", 285, something like that. Um, Maybe you want him to put on a little bit more weight, but he's got a decent frame. He's got decent athleticism too from the center position. If any team likes to pull their center, which some teams definitely do. He was good in 2023 and 2024. This season may not have been as good as those other ones were. You could definitely have that debate. Obviously, Mizzou was stuck with some quarterback troubles, so I think that made it a little difficult for the offensive line this year. But he was good the 2 years prior. He's a great pass blocker, but I do think there is work to be done in the run game. But he is a very consistent performer throughout his years of college. You pretty much know what you're getting out of Connor Tollison. Very similar to Austin Barber. It's just going to be a guy that gives you 7 out of 10s every week. And I think you take that out of the center position, especially if he's a great pass blocker, he's not letting up, too many sacks per year. I think, Connor Charleston will definitely translate to the NFL very solidly, um, especially when he's facing these lighter D linemen that move to the interior. I think you want him to put on around like 15 pounds to get to that 300 threshold, but very solid center there in Connor Tolleson. I think he'll be great in the NFL as well. Or not great, but a serviceable guy in the NFL for a team that does need a center. I think he's going to come in and compete, and may end up being that number one guy because he's shown a lot of promise in the college level, especially in 23-24. A little bit of a down year this year, but I think that's a lot of the quarterback trouble for Mizzou. Rather than his talent level, because he definitely has shown the talent level from the center position before. So yeah, Connor Tollison is my sleeper number 23. I have him going in the late 5th round. Moving on to number 24. This is another one of my biggest sleepers in this class, and that is Mr. Tanner Koziol out of Houston. They have him as a mid 4th round grade. He played in 13 games for Houston this year. Had 74 receptions for 727 receiving yards. 9.8 yards per attempt as a tight end is exceptional. Had 6 receiving touchdowns in there, especially with the workload that he got. 9.8 yards per reception is exceptional. 6 receiving touchdowns in there. Played on the inline tight end position 156 times, and then at the slot 215 times. And my personal grade for him is an early 3rd round grade. This is a guy that's 6'7", 250. Everything's there on tape besides the run blocking prowess, and that's why he was lined up in the slot a little bit more. But such a weapon at that tight end position that if you want to run 4 wide, you can literally run with him as your slot receiver, and you'll be fine. That's how good of a playmaker he is. Just one of the most exciting guys in this class, someone that I think would really work in Houston. If you're able to pair him up with a blocking tight end, which there's 3 we'll touch on later in this video. Kind of 4 technically, but Koziol's the guy that's not really your blocking tight end. He's more of your playmaking tight end. I definitely think if you get him to 260 and make that 10 pounds of muscle, then he'll definitely improve as a blocker because he definitely has the size and the frame at 6'7", 250. But I think there's some pounds to be added on, but he has incredible athleticism for a tight end, incredible receiving ability, incredible in tight spaces, incredible contested catching. Just a really, really good receiver from the tight end position. I think will be a playmaker for any team that does get him. Um, I think he can line up inline for you and just be a check down guy for you with those great hands. Great after the catch as well. Just one of the best receivers from the tight end spot in this draft, as well as Daquan Wright out of Ole Miss. So I have Tanner Koziel going in the early third round. Moving on to sleeper number 25, we got Mr. Oscar Delp out of Georgia. This is a guy that played 14 games for the Bulldogs this year. He's listed at a mid fifth round grade. Only had 20 receptions on the year for 261 receiving yards, 13.1 yards per reception. Only found the end zone one time, but played in line 238 times and only in the slot 77 times. This is a guy that I have going early in the fourth round because um, similar to Kojiel, he has great athleticism for a tight end. He's not as big as Kojiel, but I think he's a bit better of a blocker in the run game. That's why he played on the inline a little bit more. The inline means you can play as a sniffer behind the offensive lineman, kind of uh, as a fullback kind of thing, hybrid, or you just play on the outside of a tackle in a traditional stance for an offensive lineman, and you're either tasked with down blocking and releasing, or just releasing straight off the jump. But Oscar Delp can do all that for you. He can line up in the slot for you if you want to. He's got incredible athleticism for a tight end. He's got good hands for a tight end, good after the catch ability, and on top of that, he's a good blocker. So all things considered, I think this is one of the more well-rounded tight ends in this draft class, and I think some teams are definitely going to consider him pretty highly just because of his ability to do everything quite well. Um, and he definitely has a high ceiling there with his athleticism that he does possess, especially as a receiver. I think he's great after the catch. You watch his highlights. His highlights are pretty fun. His highlights are fun is something that I'll say because he is pretty dynamic after the catch. But for a tight end, he does everything well. He's a decent blocker, decent receiver. Um, and I think a team will be lucky to have him, especially his tight end depth. If he's not going to be a starter for you, he's going to be one of the better depth pieces in the league. So yeah, I have Oscar Delp going up about a round and a half um, from sites grades to my grades in the early fourth round. Moving on to a guy that I deem is very underrated, and that's Nate Borkirkshire out of Texas A&M. He's a guy that has a mid fifth round grade and played in 13 games this year for the Aggies. Obviously, lost in the first round to Miami. Had 19 receptions this year for 198 receiving yards, which equates to 10.4 yards per reception. 3 receiving touchdowns in there, and only had about 225 offensive snaps. 169 of them were in line, and then 56 of them were in the slot. I have this guy going in the late third round. So passing up uh, Mr. Oscar Delp there, and going very high, and that's because of how good he is as a blocker. You see the inline stat. He's a very bulky tight end. He's going to get down and dirty for you at the tight end position. Just a very, very good blocker in the run game, good in the gap scheme, good in the zone scheme. Basically, a 6 offensive lineman for Texas A&M this year when they needed to, get some beef in there at the tight end position. He's incredible as a blocker. These last 2 guys that I'm talking about after Borkirkshire are also amazing blockers, but one of my favorite blockers in this class is Nate Borkirkshire, and I think he's not the worst in terms of a receiving tight end too. He's got decent athleticism, obviously not something that jumps off the chart like a Kojiel or a Delp, but decent athleticism in there. He reminds me a lot of a Cade Stover, but a better receiving threat than a Cade Stover at the same time. Cade Stover is huge, able to block very well. Borkirkshire does that exact same thing. Um, Huge, blocks well, but I think he's also pretty. I'm not going to say pretty dynamic, but somewhat dynamic, a little bit underrated in terms of a receiver. So, yeah, I have him jumping about a round and 2/3 from the mid fifth to the late third round. Um, but that leads me to number 27, and that is Mr. Jack Velling out of Michigan State. This is a guy that has a late seventh to an undrafted free agent round grade. Played in 12 games for the Spartans this year. This is a dynamic playmaker at the tight end position again. 36 receptions for 359 receiving yards, 10 yards per reception. Basically, it could be like 9.999999997, something like that. I don't know. But found the end zone 3 times this year. Lined up 180 times in or on the end line, and then 164 times in the slot. Guy with a late fifth round grade. This is very similar to Kojiel's case, just not the frame that Kojiel has and the production that Kojiel has, but a guy that's going to be able to play make for you at the tight end position. But he's also a decent blocker, so he's basically the opposite of what you'd call an Nate Borkircher, who I just talked about in terms of, Borkircher's known for his blocking, Velling's known for his playmaking at the tight end position, um, but serviceable as a blocker, while Borkircher's serviceable as a receiver. But I think this is a great get for whoever does get him. I think he's a dynamic playmaker at the tight end position. Transfer from Purdue, I want to say, to Michigan State, and really showed out for Michigan State this year, but was also great at the school prior, putting up very similar statistics, if not better. Michigan State's a little bit of a mess right now, especially with their quarterback situation. You don't really know what's going to go on there. But yeah, Velling's, one of my sleepers in this class. Um, out of 27 sleepers, I think this is one of the guys that I would highlight as a sleeper, because I think he could produce well in the NFL if he does get a shot somewhere as a tight end 2, tight end 3 even. I think we'll show out in the preseason and then, get some snaps in the regular season and show some promise. I think a guy with a lot of promise head into the NFL as a playmaker. You can see he's multifaceted in terms of he can line up in the end line, he can line up in the slot. Basically split there. You can see the athleticism highlighting there in terms of the slot snaps. Um, just really good after the catch. A big guy that can run, but he can also block. His blocking is a little bit underrated there. So, yeah, Jack Velling out of Michigan State is another sleeper that I have. Going from the late 7th to the late 5th, so about a 2 round jump there for the guy out of Michigan State. And I hate Michigan State, but I'm giving this guy some props here. Last guy in this sleeper video, and this is sleeper number 28, we got Mr. Tanner Arkin out of Illinois. Guy with a UDFA round grade, pretty much. I didn't really see anyone having him projected to be drafted, but played in 13 games this year for Illinois. Only 13 receptions for 114 yards, equating to about 9 yards per reception at 8.8. Found the end zone twice. You can see lands himself 248 times on the inline snaps and 55 times on the slot snaps. My personal grade for him is in the mid-6th round. This is a guy that's going to be a great blocker for whoever does get him. Basically another offensive lineman on the field at the tight end spot, but a guy that can also catch decently. I wouldn't say he's that great after the catch, but he does have some plays in there where he does receive the ball quite well. Only 13 receptions, so it's not like it's that hard to find. Every time he's caught the ball this season, it's about one a game, if we're being realistic. But great for Illinois this year in terms of being on the inline blocking and doing what he needs to do. Does his job very well, and that is to block. So, I think some team will definitely value that and his ability to block, and that's why I think he will get drafted. Maybe in the 7th round there, but my personal grade for him is mid-6th round just because of how much I love him as a run blocker. Really helps out guys on that offensive line like a J.C. Davis that I touched on earlier. Being on the left-hand side of him as J.C. Davis was a tackle for them this year. Being on the outside of one of those guys and just being able to hold his own, even against defensive ends. Tanner Arkin's an incredible blocker at the tight end position. So, yeah, I think he will end up getting drafted this year because I think some team's going to value his ability to block. And if not, he's not going to be a UDFA for long. He's going to get picked up right away. But, yeah, he is my last guy of the sleepers video. So, yeah, I do hope you enjoyed, the mass haul of sleepers that you got on the offensive side of the field. Touch on defense sometime soon. I'm going to have to make that as well come to reality. Probably another 25 to 30 guys on the defense side of the ball because I do think the defense is a little bit better than the offense in this class. But yeah, let me know what y'all think about this video down in the comment section below. Sorry for the recording issues, but hopefully everything sorts itself out. I'll definitely find a way to conjoin everything and make it seem pretty smooth. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, subscribe. Took a lot of work making this one, but a lot of fun to do so. So thank you for the suggestion again. Really enjoy making these videos that I know y'all will enjoy. It gives me a lot of motivation to do so. And as always, it's Texans Takeover, and I'm out. Thanks again for watching. Peace.